I'm so short here. Yeah. Well, thank you all for coming out on a very cold, uncomfortable night. I want to start out by telling you, just recently I was at a conference and I had my name badge on, because you forget you have your name badge on. And I went to lunch with a friend, and the waitress came up and she looked at me and she looked at the name badge and she said, "Oh my goodness, you have the same name as my favorite author." I am trying so hard to look like my publicity photo. But God has a way of keeping me humble. Oh my goodness. There are so many things that have happened to me, especially when I'm on tour, that God just keeps me humble. The last tour I was on, right before I came out to speak, I bit down on something and a crown fell out. And, here this stub is, visible to everybody. And the media escorts are so wonderful. They can take care of anything. So they just very calmly sat me down and took a hairdryer and blew the tooth so it was all dry, and then put super glue on it. And we put it up with a Tampax to hold it into place. The Tampax got stuck to the tooth. So, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm trying to say, no, you'll lose the tooth. And I can't go out with a Tampax hanging So that's just one way. And I've had wonderful, wonderful opportunities. I'm getting so far off my track here, but I have so many wonderful opportunities to travel. And I was in Hong Kong, and Chinese women are petite and delicate and graceful, and I'm just not. And I'm standing in the middle of Stanley Market, and this Chinese woman jumps out, points at me, and says, "We got sizes fit even you." Yeah, like I said, God keeps me humble. Just recently, my husband and I have been doing pool walking, and we've been doing it at a friend's house because they have a pool. And so I'm supposed to meet them every day at 4 o'clock when I'm done at the office. And I was a little late one day, and Wayne had brought the dog. And so I ran in the house and quickly changed into my swimming suit and jumped in the water, and Bogey came out with my underwear. That he dragged around the pool, and he isn't just dragging, he's killing it. So, well, I didn't mean to start off with that, but since, all right. So almost always, everybody wants to know how I got started writing. And a lot of people don't realize that I am probably the one person you would least expect to have succeeded as an author. I didn't learn to read until I was 10 years old, and I was in the 5th grade. I'm dyslexic, but they didn't have a word for that when I was a kid growing up. I just did poorly in school. But I loved story, and I loved books. The first time my mother ever the first time I ever held a book was in Yakima, Washington, where I was born and grew up. And my mother took me to the library, and it was one of the old Andrew Carnegie libraries that was like a stone building. And I had this, even then, a creative imagination, because I thought, here, this is a castle, and I'm a princess. So I go in there in the library, and he hands me the book, and my mother said I grabbed hold of it with both hands and put it right next to my heart. And that librarian was Beverly Cleary. So from that time forward, I really loved books, and I wouldn't go to bed without a book in my hand. I'm still that way today. And I thought about writing and telling stories, but struggling all through school. A 3rd grade teacher told my mother, "Debbie's a nice little girl, but she's never going to do well in school." And I didn't. I barely graduated from high school. I married as a teenager. Wayne and I had 4 children in 5 years. So it was a hard going. You would not think that somebody like that has had all those problems with learning would want to write books. That's just God's sense of humor. So, but the best, I was talking to school today, a class of creative writing students. The best way I can think to describe this is when I would cut myself or burn myself, I would throb with pain. But when I thought about being a writer, I throbbed with joy. There was that happy anticipation, that warm feeling that would overcome me. But when you have the kind of background I did at school, especially, and to this day I'm a creative speller, and I just never did good grades in English. I never told anybody. The only person I ever told was my high school principal. She interviewed each one of us girls as we graduated, and she asked us what we intended to do with the rest of our lives. And I looked her right in the eye and I said, I'm going to write books. And this very sad expression came over her. And she says, Debbie, maybe you want to rethink that. And she sent me home for the rest of the day. So I didn't, it was very easy with that kind of background to just stuff those dreams into the future. And then there was a death in our family. A cousin that I had grown up with got leukemia and died of cancer. And I tell this to writing conferences, but really it's apropos to anybody that's starting or wanting to have a big dream. I was lost in the hospital, and I have I'm very directionally challenged. And I asked the doctor, how do I get from here to there? He said, so easy. You just go down the corridor, take the first right, go all the way to the end of the corridor, and walk through the doors marked, absolutely no admittance. So I walked through that door. I walked through the door marked absolutely no admittance, rented a typewriter, put it on the kitchen table, moved it at meal times. The two older kids will go off to school, and Supermom became the struggling young writer. And I wrote for 2.5 years. Oh, I loved what I was doing. I loved it so much. I hadn't sold a word, and I was taking $100 a month out of our budget, our monthly budget. It was $25 for the rental of the typewriter. I was taking a correspondence writing course, and that was $25. And for books and supplies and other things, it was about $100 a month that I was taking from our budget. And contributing, I felt nothing. But in retrospect, I taught our children some of the most valuable lessons of their lives, about the power of a dream, about believing in yourself, about standing up to rejection, about having fortitude. And I see it now play out in their own lives. After about 2.5 years, I'd written 2 books all the way through. Wayne had worked construction, and he'd been out of work. And he came to me one Sunday and he said, honey, I'm just so sorry. I can't make the car payment this month. I really need you to get a job. Now, I had married as a teenager. We had 4 babies in 5 years. I have no job skills, none. But I circled 3 jobs I thought I could apply for the next morning. And I went to bed and my heart was so heavy because I wanted this dream so badly. And I laid there in bed and I says, well, God, you gave me this dream. Just take it away because I can't do it all. Take away the desire to write. Because the kids were involved in sports, in scout, in church, in music, dance. I couldn't keep up with all their schedules. Work 40 hours a week, keep the house clean, and be a writer. The writing was going to have to go. And Wayne woke up about 2 or 3 in the morning and he says, are you awake? I said, yeah, honey. And he says, oh, what's wrong? I said, I really think I could have made it as a writer. I do. And he didn't say anything for a long time. And then he sat up and he turned on the light. And he said, all right, honey, go for it. Go for it. Now, I wish I could say, I'm just so talented that I sold right away. But it was another 2.5 years before I sold, 5 years total. Now, I'll tell you, I felt I had to start bringing in what I was taking out of our family budget. So I started selling articles. And my first thing I sold was for $5. Oh, my goodness, validation. Something I had written, sold, and was worth publication. Celebrating those little successes became very important to me. Our son Dale was in the Christmas program at church, and his entire role was to step forward, recite his Bible verse, and step back, which he did flawlessly, excepting he forgot the reference. And, the poor little boy, scared to death. And he looks at me like, help me, Mom, help me. So I went, it's Luke, it's Luke. So Dale squares his shoulders, and he goes, Luke Skywalker! just a whole new gospel. And then the next thing I sold, I got $35 for. So you can imagine, I'm coming up on the food scale here. And it was an article about our son Ted, who had a spiritual revelation. And he came and he told me, Mom, I'm going to be a missionary for Jesus. And I said, Ted, that's just great. Don't go any farther in darkest Africa and be home by dinner time, And he was about 8 at the time. And Wayne came home from work and he says, have you seen Ted lately? And I said, well, yeah, he's out riding his bike. He said, no, Debbie, he is on the corner preaching. So I went to call him for dinner, and on the sidewalk he had written, Jesus loves you, ask Ted. So at this time, I had written I was writing my 4th book, and all the way through the 4th book. And I sold another article for $350. Now you can see me just coming right up. But I had sold dozens by this time. And it was to Women's Day, how I kept the kids entertained during the summer. And I had never met another writer in the world. And Wayne said, well, honey, why don't you go to a writer's conference? You can meet editors, you can talk to an agent. And so I invested $100 of that $350 in attending a writer's conference. And I got word that 2 editors from the very house that I'd been submitting to had agreed to critique 10 manuscripts. So I submitted my proposal, which is the first 3 or 4 chapters, and the synopsis, and my manuscript was chosen as one to be reviewed. Now, I don't have any foreseeing of the future, but I remember when I got that letter, I had the most incredible feeling that this book was going to sell. And just that feeling just came over me, and I loved this story. You see, the gift God gave me is that of being a storyteller. I had to learn to be a writer, but the storytelling came naturally to me. So I attended this conference, and it was a big auditorium. There were about 300 writers there, and the 10 of us had a star on our badge. Oh my goodness. I was so excited that I was one of the 10. I had like a size 52 left breast, just walking down the aisle, letting everybody see the star on my badge. And the editor who had read my manuscript got up and she said, one of these manuscripts that I read shows a lot of promise. Now, I'd been writing for almost 5 years. I loved this story. I was absolutely convinced it was my story. I almost raised my hand and said that would be me. I mean, I was so cocky, and it wasn't me. It wasn't me. She had the entire room laughing at what she called the infeasibility of my plot. Now, she could say anything she wanted about the writing, because I knew I had to learn to be the writer. But the storytelling, the plotting, that was my strength. But I was willing to do anything. So I, swallowed my pride, which I've had to do many times. And I went to her, and I told her my name. I told her the name of my manuscript. And I said, if I rewrote this, would you give me another chance? Now, it's probably over 30 years. And I don't think I'll ever forget. She leaned forward. She put her hand on my arm, looked me in the eye, and said, throw it away. Throw it away. And wouldn't you know it, Wayne was out of work again. It was 1982. Bad time in the economy. And he was up in Alaska. The children and I were living on $150 a week unemployment check. And I went home, and I was so discouraged. I didn't even bother to go to bed. I sat up all night. And of course, having that creative imagination, the shadows on the wall are saying all those ugly, negative things I grew up with. Debbie's a nice little girl. You think you're going to be an author. You think you're going to sell a book. The best you can do is throw it away. And I thought, okay, if I ever needed to think positive, it was then. So I reached for the most positive book in the world, my Bible. And the reading for the day was John 14. The first verse says, let not your heart be troubled. And I thought, oh God, you have got a sense of humor. Because my heart was troubled. And then the last verse said, arise, let us go from here. So I went right back to that writers' conference, and I asked for a refund because, believe me, we could have used that money. And they wouldn't give it to me. They said, we don't give refunds. And I thought, okay, well, I'm not going to waste this money. So I attended a children's writing workshop. I was thinking, well, maybe this is just God's way of telling me I need to write for kids. So I went there. The editor got up and she said, well, I'm not buying anything. The agent got up and said, I'm not taking on any new clients. And then the author got up. Oh, God bless her. And she said, how many of you made $25,000 last year writing? Nobody raised their hand. She said, do this. And she listed about 8 or 9 things. I don't remember any of those 8 or 9 things except one. Do not leave a rejected manuscript on your desk. It has a home. Your job is to find it. Now, I grabbed hold of that little itty-bitty piece of hope. I grabbed hold of it with both hands, just encouraged. I can do this. I will find a home for this manuscript. So I went home and I immediately wrote a query letter, which is just a few paragraphs about the plot of the book, and put it in a self-addressed stamped envelope and sent it off and waited and waited and waited for an answer. And none came. And one day I was looking at that manuscript on my desk, and every time I did, it just started shouting at me, saying, I think you're gonna be an author. And one day, I couldn't stand it. I didn't care if New York wanted to see that manuscript or not. I was mailing it off. And so I loaded the kids up in the car. We went to the post office, and I'm standing in line, and my stomach is in knots. Because when you are living on $150 a week, $10 to mail that off is a lot of money. So I'm standing there, and I have to tell you, if I've ever seen God's hand in my life, and I have many, many times, this is probably one of the most profound moments of my life. I remember I got up to the postmaster, and I handed in the manuscript, and I keep thinking, I hope, God, please let me be doing the right thing. And he said, you have to let go of the money. So I let go of the money, and we went home, and Ted ran down, and he got the mail, and he said, Mom, that letter you've been waiting for is here. I stood right in the middle of the street, tore open the envelope, and in a Sharpie pen, the editor wrote across the top of my query letter, do not mail us your manuscript. We are not buying it this time. I went, my stomach just fell. I went in the house and I lay down on the Davenport, and I swear to you, the house could have burned to the ground and I couldn't have moved. I have never been that depressed in my life. I hadn't had teenagers yet. 3 weeks later, she called and bought the book. If I had waited a half hour, I would never, ever have mailed that manuscript. And I don't know what would have happened. But after I sold that book, you see, when a publisher buys an author or a book, they're not buying the book, they're buying the author. They want to know, because they're making a tremendous investment in you. And they want to know that you can do it again and produce. And here I had all 4 of the books I wrote sold. I had to rewrite them, but they all sold because the stories were good. So, how many of you have ever written me a letter? Have any of you ever written me? Oh, thank you. I treasure these letters. In fact, letters from my readers have changed the course of my career about 3 or 4 different times. I listen to you. I read every single piece of mail that comes into my office, and sometimes it's a lot. I sometimes have to take it home. There was one day I got 750 emails. just get what they call guest book entries, and I read every single one because it's very important to me what you say. But every letter I get is people saying that they love my books. So, and I'm going to read those. So, but I want to share with you just a few of the most wonderful letters I have gotten, just the love I have received. I love your books so much, I'm willing to pay for them. I'm sure she's a library patron. Let's be kind. And I get a lot of mail like this that's because I tend to write series. When's that next Rose Harbor Inn book coming out? I'm 85. Hooray. Or now, because I married as a teenager and I never went to college, but I like to think I'm self-taught until I got this letter. I like you best because you use small words. Oh, and this is just really one of my favorites. You're my favorite author. You put me to sleep every night. This letter actually was forwarded to me from my editor, who very kindly sent it on. And it was 3 pages long. And on the left-hand side of the page, she wrote down the title of the book. And then on the right-hand side of the page, and she put a column, she wrote down all the ways she thought I could have improved the plot. And the last line of the letter says, in fact, I have read every one of Debbie Macomber's books, and I haven't liked one of them. I just told her to keep buying those books. I'd try harder. This is another one of my favorites. This lady wrote, and she said, I will buy anything that has your name on it. So thank you, Betty, for writing such great books. I don't know who she's reading. Now, and a lot of people write, and they say they appreciate the fact that I leave the bedroom scenes behind closed doors. Well, for heaven's sakes, I am a married woman. I don't know that much. Now, just a couple of weeks ago, I got a letter from a 13-year-old girl, and she said, my grandma reads your books, and my mom reads your books, and they like them, so I decided to read one, and it was good. In fact, if it was between you and Captain Underpants, I'd read you. And then, oh, yes, there's a women's prison close to us, and I've often gone there to speak to the women and encourage them, and all there, but for the grace of God, they're just wonderful. And I got a text from the teacher after I got home that said, you were a hit. I heard one of the ladies say, now that was worth going to prison for. But my favorite all-time read-aloud letter came from a man in prison. Now, if your address is anything that goes behind prison walls, believe me, you will get mail. And they are master manipulators. They will say anything they think you want to hear. How you've changed their lives. The stories have made them, they're going to, turn from a life of crime because they read your romance novel. So they're just, but this guy did not get the memo. He wrote and he said, you can be my woman. I don't even care that you're fat. I didn't waste that letter. I took it home and I waved it under Wayne's nose and I said, I could have him. I could have him. You just better shape up. So now, a lot of people ask me about, and I'm going to give you an opportunity to ask me questions, but I already know some of the questions you're going to ask me. They ask me about Port Orchard because Port Orchard, the TV series is based on, Cedar Cove series is based on the city of Port Orchard. Now, I'll tell you 3 things that really help define the city of Port Orchard. The first one you may need to think about, the dollar store had a sale. So just think about that. If they have to put things on sale. And then because the titles for the Cedar Cove series were all addresses, I started paying attention to the street names in Port Orchard. And I have driven past this street probably 1,000 times. Easy Street, right in Port Orchard. And Wayne was driving at the time, and I said, honey, turn here. And he goes, why? And I said, I want to see if Easy Street is different than any other street. Well, by golly, in Port Orchard, Washington, it is. It's a dead end. And we have a wonderful Chinese laundry cleaners in Port Orchard. And it's an immigrant that has taken it over. And his name begins with an X, and I swear to you, it's 13 letters long. And I try, but being dyslexic, languages are hard for me. Difficult names are hard for me. And I just massacred it. And so the last time I was in, he got this big smile on his face, and he said, "I choose American name." I said, "Oh, I'm so glad. What did you choose? What's your American name?" "Jose." So okay, and a lot of people ask me about Wayne, because Wayne really is my hero. We've been married all these years. We were just kids when we got married. I mean, my grandchildren are getting to be this age now. I cannot imagine them marrying at the age that I did, So, but okay, now Wayne, the construction electrician. I'm just going to give you some stories about Wayne, because he's such a character. He's a construction electrician. He's got the big beer belly. He's got the big belt buckle. He's a he-man. So he's going to go out in the woods with his buddy Norm, and they're two peas in a pod, and they're going to take their guns and their he-man, and they're going to go out in the woods with their dogs. Their dogs' names are Ruffles and Peterkins. So I did a 20-city tour for a book called 20 Wishes, and Wayne shook his head at me, and he says, honey, if you'd have titled that book 3 Wishes, you'd have been home a long time ago. And I signed us up for ballroom dancing classes, and Wayne is not the ballroom dancing kind of guy. But by golly, I have sailed the seas for this man. I have ridden motorcycles. I have climbed mountains. The least he could do is take a ballroom dancing class. And he complained, he groaned, he griped, and then he said, "All right, what's it going to cost me to buy my way out of this? Ladies, take note. Look at this diamond." Yes. Now, we got Fitbits for Christmas. You can see I'm wearing my Fitbit. I walk more than Wayne does. And we're both so competitive, and so I'm constantly telling him, "How many steps do you have?" And he goes, "How many steps do you have?" Well, I found him trying to put it on the dog. He was we were going to Weight Watchers, so he was rubbing my back down, and he goes, "Honey, you're getting an hourglass figure. You're getting an hour and 15 minutes. And he can be so irreligious sometimes. We attend a church that serves real wine for communion. And, this is not like top-rated, Zagat-rated wine, let me tell you. This is just, boxed wine. And he leaned over to me and he says, "If I was Jesus, I'd turn it back into water." Okay, and another one of the questions I almost always get are any of your children going to be authors? And any one of them could be, but they don't have the passion for it. And you really, if you want to be an author, you need to be passionate. They're all very creative. However, my grandson, when he was 8 years old, showed all the signs of being a natural-born writer. His school was vandalized, and they never caught who did it. And he was so upset about it. All on his own, he sat down and wrote a story. And in the story, he was instrumental in capturing the culprits. And the last line of his story was, "When they got out of jail, they were too old for bingo." Now, I thought that was a really good line. I said, "James, can Grandma use that?" Now, here's the test of a real author. If you pay me. So, okay, well, I'm going to give you a chance to ask me questions. Yes.
We so missed the Cedar Cove series. We wish it would just keep going.
I know. Andy McDowell and I got together 2 weekends ago, and we were just kind of, yeah. But I'll tell you why I think it got canceled. It was still the most popular cable television at 8 o'clock program. That was the very first one that Hallmark produced, and they found now they can do it cheaper. Andy McDowell was up for renewal and was asking for a big increase, or that's what actors do. And I just think that they'd learned some lessons along the way. So, but it was a wonderful opportunity, and I'm grateful to have had it. So, there's just not many authors that can say they've had a TV series based on their books. So, I'm just grateful for the opportunity. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes.
You were talking about your office. Do you have something away from home, or do you have a dedicated desk at home?
I have a dedicated office, and unlike other authors who I was a stay-at-home mom. So other authors usually have outside jobs, and their goal is to make enough money to quit their jobs, go home and write. My goal was to make enough money to get out of there. So I had an office. I hired my assistant, whose name is Renata. She's been with me 22 years now. And my career has got so multifaceted. There's the movies. Even with the Cedar Cove series being canceled, the Hallmark Gold Crown stores are producing 140 Cedar Cove products. So there's merchandising, and there's more than that going on too. There's the merchandising. 3 of my books now have been turned into plays. So and the social media has become so important in an author's career. So, there's just many different facets that I now have a staff of 7. So, and there's only me, I'm the one that's sole income for everybody. So, yes, my dear.
What authors do you enjoy reading?
Oh, that's been asked me 3 times today. And right now I am reading, I'm actually listening to Joel Rosenberg, The First Hostage. I just think I read all across the board. If I was going to recommend any book to you, and this is an ebook author, she's not with a publisher, it's a book by the name of Making Faces by Amy Harmon. It was such a good book. I have every one of my family's reading it. It's just been such a good book. I like to read Regencies because they're so different than what I write. And I read Audrey Harrison, Mary Bailow, Erin Knightley. So they're just a bunch of, I just read them all the time. But that's what I do to relax. There's a lot of books I read for quotes. Authors will ask me, and if it lines up with what I write, then I'm happy to give them a quote. So, yeah. So a lot of quote stuff. Well, I'm just downright friendly, folks. You don't. Yes.
Where do you get the inspiration for your characters? Cedar Cove is such a broad range of people.
Oh, well, thank you. Actually, where I get my inspiration is 2 house payments. How I develop characters is I find a plot premise, an idea that I want to develop. And I'm going to digress here a little bit, because I can have an idea every day. Really, that's a gift God gave me, is being a storyteller. So I could get an idea every day. So I had to come up with the means of deciding what ideas to develop. So I struggled with this for a long time. So I gauge the idea by words. The first word is provocative. I want my reader to think. I want to give you a story that is you can put yourself in it and think, what would I do in that situation? I want it to be relevant to your lives, so that when you pick up the book, it's about somebody you would identify with yourself. I want to tell the story in the most creative way I can think to tell it. I want it to be entertaining. I'm not here to teach. I'm not here to preach. I'm here to entertain. And it has to be realistic, real people, things that would really happen to people, that you would feel like, yes, I know somebody that happened to, or this is how I would have done it. So all of those 5 words. So once I have the plot premise and it aligns up to those words, I decide what characters would fit into that and why. And that's how I do it, the characters. And I do because there is such a wide range of ages in my readers. I try to make the characters in those ages. So you'll notice in A Girl's Guide, it's a woman in her 50s and a woman in her 30s. So, and if anybody else picked this up, I don't know if my daughter didn't, this is really based on the book of Ruth, Naomi and Ruth, because they are mother-in-law and daughter-in-law. And my most popular books have all been based on an idea I got from Scripture. And Mrs. Miracle came from Hebrews 13:2. We entertain angels unaware. The Christmas books on surely goodness and mercy came from the 23rd Psalm. So, and the Mr. Miracle, actually that idea came from a reader who wrote a letter and said, you need an angel named Will. And I said, well, why? Why would I have an angel named Will? I just put the letter down and I said, why that? And then she says, because the verse says, surely goodness and mercy will follow you. So I made him an apprentice angel. So, yeah. No other questions?
When you write, do you have, depending on the season of your life, because I read some of your books that I was extremely emotional, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm crying. And then I read some books, and just like Dashing Through the Snow, that was hilarious. It was super funny. So the tone of your plot, it just depends on the season of your life, or it's just something that this is going to be funnier, this is going to be more emotional. How do you think?
It's just how the story comes to me. Some of them, just the plot premise themselves are funny. But you bring up an interesting fact, and that is there is something that connects us as readers and author. I know if I cry during a scene, you're going to cry. And if I laugh, you're going to laugh. And if I put my heart on the page, it links with yours. So there is really a connection. I mean, I could take somebody else's book and just type it out and give it to you to read, and you would feel none of that emotion. It comes from inside me and links with you. So, and actually, I think that's what makes my books popular. That intimacy between the author and the reader, and any author actually, not just me. So, yes.
You have so many different series with so many different characters. How do you keep them straight?
Well, first of all, the reason I have so many series is because I fall so in love with these characters, I don't want to let them go. But it got just a little bit ridiculous with the Cedar Cove series because, people would come up to me and they'd say something like, oh, whatever happened to Justine? And I'd go, oh, who's Justine? Who's Justine? So it's snowballing, so many of these authors so many of these characters, every book was filled with characters and you felt like I had to update them. And, so after 13 books, I had to create a Bible. I literally had to create a Bible of the character names and when they were introduced at what book and what page. And I got to be very confusing, which is why I started the Rose Harbor Inn series, which I am telling you, this was such a brilliant idea. I just thank God for it every day because the characters come, stay the weekend, and go. That is one of the downfalls of having written series. But also series are very popular. Oh boy, now all of a sudden everybody's got a question. Okay, weigh in this right there.
I know you do also, not only do you do fiction or Christian fiction, but you've done cookbooks and you've done the knitting books. How did that come about?
Oh, that came about for charity. I did those for charity, and I didn't do the patterns in them. I'm not a designer, but I see several knitters here. Welcome. Knitting actually saved me as a kid. I had such terrible low self-esteem and struggled so hard, always at the bottom of my class. And I wanted to learn how to knit. I don't know why this came. I'm sure it's something in a gene that I have that none of my cousins got. But I was about 11, and I pestered my mother all one summer. I want to learn to knit. I want to learn to knit. So she took me to the yarn store, and I sat down with the ladies, and they taught me to knit. And it was life-changing for me because it helped me with comprehension skills because I had to read that pattern so carefully. It helped me with math skills, and it gave me a sense of accomplishment and a badly needed feeling of self-esteem. So, and to this day, I knit before I came here. I always have projects with me. So, Yeah, and there's somebody right in front of her.
That was similar to what I was saying, because when I thought of you, I thought you'd be the one with a bag of 50 yarns, you know what I mean? Because it seemed like you were you were very avid in knitting, because I think in that one book, I think it was 20 Wishes, or where the women would get together and have therapy, and all these people were coming in from all different areas. So
Yes.
I wanted to see how that background in that book came from you.
Yeah, that knitting just came, and now I am part of the National Cabinet for World Vision and Knit for Kids. And this the summer of 2014, my husband, my daughter, and two of my granddaughters, we traveled with a team from World Vision to Kenya to hand out these sweaters that had come from all across America. The women had knitted these sweaters, and it was just the most wonderful and amazing experience. We went to, you don't think, Kenya's on the equator, you don't think they're going to need sweaters, but oh my goodness, we were 8,000 feet above sea level, and it was cold. It was cold. We went to this one town called Sook, and there are no roads to Sook. I'm telling you, it was a dirt pathway up over a mountain pass, and it was a scary ride. And now we have a whole new saying in our family: that was no road to suck. So, yeah. Yes.
Okay. Every time I put a book down and I finish it, I go to the website and see what's next. And I know I'm just so excited to have it in my hands. It's a hot book to read. I'm curious what's coming up next.
Oh, well, thank you for asking. The last book in the Rose Harbor Inn series, the 5th book in that series, is called Sweet Tomorrows, and that'll be out in August. And the Christmas book for this year is titled 12 Days of Christmas, and it's a great premise. I love this idea. It's a woman who meets a man he's around her age, that is just unpleasant. He's a grouch. And she finds him stealing her newspaper. And this has actually happened to Wayne and I many times. You know, you live in an apartment complex or a condo, and they just put the papers down there, and they have the apartment number in a Sharpie on the bag. And he takes her bag. He takes her paper. She says, "Hold on just a minute. You just took it." And he says, "Somebody took mine. I took yours. You take somebody else's." That's just the way it works. And she's just so outraged. So she's complaining to a friend, and her friend says, "Well, just kill him with kindness." And so she does a 12-day experiment of killing him with kindness, thinking, she's going to butter him up. She's going to just be so kind and sweet and wonderful to him, and it's just going to change him. And so she blogs about the experiment. What she doesn't expect is how kindness is going to change her. So, yeah. I probably should tell you something about the book that I'm supposed to be talking about. With A Girl's Guide to Moving On. And it's about two women that had lived the country club life. Both of their husbands had cheated on them. One had been a long-time marriage, over 30 years, and she just had turned her head the other way, and it was enough. She just had enough. Then her son is doing the same thing. And she actually is the one who tells her daughter-in-law that what is happening. And so the two of them form a support group for each other, and they make up a list of things to do to go on in their life. This is a book about new beginnings, and it's also a book about forgiveness. And one of the incidences in there actually happened. I had a friend who was going through a divorce, and she had never driven before, and she had to get her driver's license. And so I'm going out with her, and I'm trying to help her, and she backs the car into a ditch. And the car's like this. Just straight up and down. And so I managed to get out. I help her get out, and the tow truck driver comes in, and she says, "I swear to you, I have not been drinking." And he looks at her and he says, "You mean to tell me you did that sober?" So it was just so funny. I put it in a book. But it's how the first thing that they do is that they help others. They figure, instead of wallowing in their own pain, because it's really the death of a marriage, that they are going to reach out and help others. And so Leanne, who's the mother-in-law, the older one, she teaches English as a second language, and it's the wonderful people she meets in the class. And this young Ukrainian man who bakes bread, and he's a baker, and he says with bread what he can't say with words. He's just so in love with her, and oh my goodness, I fell so in love with Nikolai. Oh my. And the other one is Rocco, the tow truck driver. So they don't need the country club life. You know, they both found happiness elsewhere. So, although I'm just giving the whole plot away. But you still might want to read the book. So I think I'm so happy to sign the books for you, and I hope you enjoy it. And thank you for coming out on such a miserable night.